Today, we're digging into corporate governance. Might sound a little dry, but trust me, it's the hidden rule book that shapes how the world's biggest and most powerful companies actually run. It's the foundation for everything they do, from their biggest strategic bets to how much you and I can trust them.
So, it makes you wonder, who's really calling the shots at a huge corporation? You might think it's the CEO, right? Well, the real answer is way more interesting. It's actually a whole system of rules, roles, and responsibilities designed to keep things in check.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics, what governance even is. Then we'll clear up the difference between governance and management. We'll look at why the rules are so different for public and private companies, compare a couple of ways boards are structured around the world, and wrap up with what governance means in the wild world we live in today.
All right, first up, the rule book for power. You can think of this as the company's own private constitution. It's the blueprint that lays out exactly who has power and how they're allowed to use it.
So, what is corporate governance really? Well, at its heart, it's the system that answers three really big questions. First, who gets to have the power? Second, how are the huge company-shaping decisions actually made? And third, who does the company have to answer to? It's all about that balance between authority and accountability.
That's why we call it a corporate constitution. I mean, think about it. As soon as you have more than one owner or a bunch of shareholders, you can't just wing it. You need a formal rulebook, usually called the Articles of Association. This document is absolutely essential because it lays out all the rules and protects everyone involved by making sure there's no confusion about who's in charge.
Okay, now let's clear up something that trips a lot of people up, the difference between governance and management. They sound kind of similar, but they play totally different roles, and getting this distinction is key to understanding how companies work.
Here's the easiest way to think about it. Governance is all about the what and the why. That's the board of directors, looking at the big picture, setting the long-term direction. Management, on the other hand, is the how. That's the CEO and their team, who are responsible for actually executing that vision every single day. You absolutely need both to succeed, a great strategy and the skill to make it happen.
Now, this rule book we've been talking about, it changes in a big way depending on whether a company is public or private. It's like they're playing in two completely different leagues, with two very different sets of rules.
So, a private company, right? They get their money from a small group of investors, and the regulations are pretty light. But a public company, they can sell their shares to literally anyone on the stock market. And that access to all that public money comes with a massive catch. They have to follow super strict rules on transparency and reporting. It's all about protecting the people who invest their savings.
And these rules didn't just pop up out of nowhere, they were born out of a major crisis. The stock market crash of 1929 happened in part because companies could basically hide how much trouble they were in. Investors had no idea what was going on. Public trust was completely destroyed. So, to fix that, the U.S. government created the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, in 1934. Its job then, and its job now, is to force companies to be transparent to make sure the game is fair for everyone.
So, we know every company needs a board. But what's interesting is that not all boards are built the same way. Let's take a quick look at two different approaches to structuring power at the very top. In the US and the UK, for example, they use what's called a unitary board, just one single board. And this creates a really fascinating challenge. On one hand, the board has to be a tough monitor, a critic, asking the CEO hard questions when targets are missed. But on the other hand, they also need to be a supportive mentor, encouraging that same CEO to take bold risks. Trying to be both the coach and the referee at the same time? That is a very tricky balancing act. Now, contrast that with the German system. They have a two-tiered board, which basically solves that problem by splitting the roles up. You have a management board that runs the company's daily operations. And then you have a completely separate supervisory board made up of reps from both shareholders and employees, and their only job is to watch over the management board. It builds a really clear wall between managing and monitoring. Okay, so we've covered the basics, but the world keeps changing, right? And as it does, the job of corporate governance is changing with it. What used to be a pretty straightforward role is now, well, it's a lot bigger. If you were to look at governance a couple of decades ago, this is pretty much what it was all about. Making sure the board was set up right, protecting shareholders, keeping executives in line, and just generally making sure all the financial and legal boxes were ticked. It was a classic checklist.
But wow, look at the agenda today. It has exploded. Boards are now on the hook for massive, complex issues like environmental sustainability, cyber threats, the ethics of AI, and even things like the psychological safety of their own employees. The job has grown way beyond just mining the books.
Here's a pretty cool way to visualize all of this. Picture a sports club. The board is at the very top of a triangle, setting the overall strategy. Management is in the middle, actually coaching the team and running the place. But then there's this big circle of outside forces all around them. You've got regulators, sponsors, fans, the community. All of them are constantly influencing every move the club makes. It's a great reminder that no company operates in a vacuum.
And that really gets to the heart of what modern governance is all about. It's not just playing defense anymore, just following rules and avoiding trouble. Good governance today is about being proactive. It's about building an organization that's not just profitable, but also responsible, innovative, and a positive force in the world.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Is the real point of governance just to be the corporate rule enforcer? Or has it evolved into something much, much bigger? Something like building the very conscience of the corporation itself?